Once again, everyone, thank you so much for joining us for today's Buzz webinar sponsored by Valkyrie, how to specialize in appraisals for right-of-way and eminent domain. With us today, we have two great experts for you. We have Eric Schneider, who's the senior appraiser with Jones, Roach, and Carangella. And then we have Andy Schwab, the VP of Product and Solutions at Valkyrie. Eric, I'm going to hand it over to you and let you get started.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk about a segment of the appraisal business that some may be familiar with, some have no idea what it's about, and others that may just be a little bit curious about the kind of work that I do and that our peers do. I'll give a shout out to Andy Schwab in a sec, but the goal of this presentation is to introduce you to the concept of valuing property for condemnation and eminent domain purposes. It's a rather complex field, and so we won't be able to get into a lot of the details on this in this presentation. But I think the most important thing is to let you know that these opportunities do exist. There are ways to learn about right-of-way and eminent domain appraising, and there's ways to get involved too. I'll try my best to answer the Q&A questions as we go along. I'll do my best to answer them at the end if I don't get to it. But my email is going to be at the end of this presentation. And so the thought here is this is an open discussion, an open dialogue, and it's not something that necessarily ends with today, either in your learning opportunity or a chance to connect later on. So appreciate the chance to talk. Here's me. Right now I'm a senior appraiser with a boutique appraisal firm in San Diego. I'll soon be starting a partnership with another local appraiser in Southern California, but my experience is involved in mainly what I'll call disputed real estate matters, non-lending, litigation-based, and a lot of it has to do with appraisals for right-of-way and condemnation matters, where eminent domain is exercised, and specialty practice in forensic review. So reviewing appraisals for both public agencies and property owners, and providing critique on that. Work with government agencies, law firms, private property owners, the whole gamut. And I'm a member of the Appraisal Institute and International Right-of-Way Association. And it was this kind of coincidence that I added that word active there, because as we'll talk about later on in this presentation, being involved in organizations is paramount to get opportunities to do this kind of work. I was recently involved in Valkyrie's podcast, The Opinions of Value. I wanted to give a quick shout out to Matt Van Eck and Angela Hernandez. They were my co-panelists, and they are prominent eminent domain appraiser rock stars in California. So quick shout out to them. So I think it's important to kind of introduce this topic. I think the social media and the buzz around this presentation was about how to specialize in eminent domain. And the concept of eminent domain is this. It's the right of the government to take private property for public use. The reason that I have a job, and the reason that eminent domain attorneys exist and acquisition agents exist, and our whole right-of-way profession is what it is based on the Bill of Rights and the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. The Fifth Amendment says, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. And so that established this process of compensating a property owner for rights that are acquired. And the rights can be an easement, it could be a partial acquisition, it could be a full total taking of that property if it's necessary for a project to be built. Eminent domain is the governmental power to take property. You'll hear eminent domain and you'll hear condemnation. Condemnation is the act or process of enforcing that right of eminent domain. So when I use the words condemnation or eminent domain, I'm kind of using it interchangeably, but one is the power that that the government has, and the other is the action of using that power. And so that's kind of a tidbit I wanted to share when you're conversing with attorneys or you're conversing with agencies, just to say, hey, I do condemnation appraising, or I appraise property when it's involved in eminent domain. And again, condemnation, put another way, the taking of private property for public use. Unfortunately, when just compensation was stated as being necessary for taking property, it wasn't defined in the Bill of Rights. And so that concept has since evolved over time. But just compensation, as you see on the screen, is the amount of loss for which an owner is compensated when property is taken. And there's two components to that. There are the value of rights, the easement being taken or the partial acquisition being acquired. But there's also two other aspects too that are important to note. One is if there's any damage or diminution in value to the remainder of the property, the property is not being taken. That's something that has to be considered. And if there's also a benefit or an increase of value because of that public project being built, that's something else that has to be considered as well. You could have a auto dealership where a public project is taking place right out front, and some land's being taken, and it may damage the remainder. But if what's being built is a freeway where it's 400,000 cars a day, that might be beneficial to that auto dealership. Now, I'm from Southern California, so 400,000 cars a day on a freeway is a midnight on a Tuesday. But just to give you some context about how that works. Over time, just compensation has been measured by market value. I'm sure you all are familiar with that term, but market value can be defined differently depending on what state you're in, what jurisdiction you're in, whether or not it's taken by the federal government or a local agency. So one of the pro tips for doing this kind of work is just knowing what jurisdiction you're in and knowing what definition of value to use. I've seen more times than I care to count where the wrong definition of value is used. And if that's the case, it doesn't, it affects your credibility. And the rules of valuation can depend on the jurisdiction as well. That's something that's important when you do this kind of work. Certain valuation methodologies may or may not be applicable. The way that you appraise property may be subject to certain evidence codes that apply to your state. And so there's a lot of different laws and regulations that we as appraisers, and particularly in this field of work, need to be cognizant of. So just a couple of tidbits for you to introduce the concept of this kind of work. And mainly the takeaway is there are rules and regulations that you have to follow that may not be as relevant or seen in your day-to-day practice. When public agencies acquire property, they typically need an appraisal of those rights to determine market value. There may be some instances where hiring an appraiser is not necessary. It could be done in-house or, depending on the size of the take. But generally, an appraisal of those rights is necessary. The agency gets the appraisal. They establish what they think is the just compensation, and they make an offer to the property owner. The property owner may say, no, thanks. You didn't consider this issue, or I think the market value of the rights acquired is different. And so they may hire an appraiser to do an independent valuation. There may be a review of either the acquisition appraisal or the property owner's appraisal. And so the point of this slide is there are numerous opportunities for an appraiser to get involved in an eminent domain or right-of-way manner. At the acquisition stage for the agency, at the trial stage for the agency, at the trial stage for the property owner, a review appraiser, as someone actually appraising those rights, there's lots of opportunities, and so that's important to share, because it's a lot of different chances for one to be able to get involved. Before I go any further, that's kind of the introduction to Eminent Domain and why I do what I do. But I'd like to hear a little bit more about the audience and get your experience about valuations in right-of-way and for condemnation. There may be some that only work on residential, some may only do commercial, and so love to see kind of your experience with kind of the realm that you work in, because I will say that there may be those that specialize in one or the other, and it's important to know that opportunities exist for both the commercial and residential side, and for those who do both. There's a lot of matters that I work in where it's a residential component and or a commercial component, and it's important to have that kind of experience. All right, so it looks like most of the people on the call are either residential based, or they do a little bit of both, commercial and residential. There's a few that do just commercial work, and that's okay. It's all good. But yeah, it's nice to get the flavor of those on the call, so we can talk about those opportunities. The next poll is just to get a sense of your experience in this space. There may be some who already have a pretty extensive experience and want to learn what one appraiser does in this realm. There may be some who are just interested, and so that's good too, just to talk about the opportunities that are available and some of the pros and cons of doing this kind of work. And some may have had some experience, maybe want to learn a little bit more about it, or had some experiences like, yeah, maybe this isn't for me. But looks like some have, majority of you have limited experience or are just interested to hear about this kind of work, and that's good. There's a couple who are saying that have extensive experience, and so I hope that you check my work at the end of this presentation and let me know what's good or not. Cool. No, appreciate you all taking a part in those polls. It helps me kind of tailor this presentation to give you the information that I think would be beneficial for you. So one question that I get a lot is, why get involved, or why not get involved in appraisals for right-of-way or eminent domain purposes? There was the Infrastructure Act that was passed a couple of years ago, and in part that was meant to have a big investment in public transit. That could be updating existing projects, but it's also tailored towards new projects as well. And it's not just because there's an Infrastructure Act that there are projects available. There are just needs for public transportation at the local, regional, and federal level. And so that's all important. And so that requires appraisal services. But the issue that comes across, especially in my line of work, is that there is a declining appraiser pool. It's hard enough to break into this industry in general, but just learning this type of work is specialized, and there is a declining population of appraisers. And so attorneys, agencies are asking me all the time, who are the next people in line to do this kind of work, because we need appraisal services. And our current appraisers could be several months out from completing an assignment, and if something needs to be done, that's not helpful to the client. And so there's demand for appraisal services. So that is one of the reasons why you should think about getting involved in this kind of work. And I know that for other types of appraisal assignments, it could be cyclical depending on certain economic conditions. I know with interest rates being as high as they are and low transaction volume, the lending side has dipped down a little bit relative to prior years. So this is certainly one avenue that an appraiser can take to diversify the kind of work that they do. Litigation appraising is not just condemnation, but it certainly can be a huge part of your business. Let's talk about the pros and cons of doing this type of work. For those of you who enjoy complex appraisal issues, this is the work that you should think about doing. Like I talked about, you're appraising the property. You appraise what's called the larger parcel, and that is the property with all the rights currently available. You're considering the value of the part taken, which is one aspect. And then after you consider the part taken and you have a remainder property, you are appraising that property again. And you're considering damages or a diminution of value to that remainder. You're considering benefits to that remainder. The long and short of this is there are multiple valuation scenarios that one may or may not have to perform just for a single property. The types of properties that I get to work on can be complex. There are situations where numerous properties have to be appraised. If there's a corridor that's being planned and 40 residential properties are being impacted, that is something that has to be considered. Valuation methodology, the appropriate way to value each of those properties, it can get complex. And that's what's really interesting about this kind of work. It's not simply, all right, I'm just going to go in and out, work on one property type all day. And we can talk about that later on, but it's interesting. It's get to work with a variety of different property types. And I get to work with clients who not only need my opinion because they have to submit an offer to the property owner or the public agency, but they want to hear what you have to say and how you came up with your opinions. I came from the lending world, and there were times where, I'd write this beautiful report. You've never seen it, but you have to believe me. And the client only cares about what's on page 2, and that can be frustrating. But in this case, sometimes a single word counts in either what you say or what you write. And so it's pretty important to make sure that your opinions are supported. But again, there are clients that want and need to hear what you have to say. If it's a eminent domain trial matter, the other side will definitely want to hear what you have to say. And so there's a certain level of joy that I get in doing my research and making sure that my valuation is the way it should be. I get to interact with a bunch of different kind of folks all the time. I'm not just sitting in my office typing on my computer. Working with property owners, working with property owners council or agency counsel, and working with other experts, whether that's a civil engineer or a traffic consultant or construction expert or hospitality expert. Just learning from different people and their vast level of experience is something that's pretty cool for the kind of work that we do. We are just one component of this process where rights are condemned. Get to work with a business appraiser or a personal property appraiser. Just the ability to be able to talk to these folks, learn something a little bit different is something that's pretty nice. The other thing that I think is a pro in our industry is just an understanding of appraisal and legal matters, appraisal methodology and knowing the case law. The way that we appraise property, particularly in California, where a lot of my work occurs, there's case law and evidence code that guides the appraisal process. And just knowing that exists is very interesting. But just being aware of the laws and regulations that guide our practice knowing the valuation theory and why you value property a certain way, that's really rewarding to be able to look into those issues. Like I said, a lot of my work is doing forensic review. And so reading appraisal treatises and the case law and all that to help support my opinion. That's pretty cool. And that's something that is certainly prevalent in litigation, but particularly in condemnation matters as well. Some of the cons could be, yeah, Eric, that's all great, but that's not my cup of tea. There are some that have made a great business in focusing on a certain property type or a certain segment of the business that's not condemnation. And so that's fine. If working on something different every day and having to rack your brain is something that's not your cup of tea, that's fine. That could be a reason not to pursue this avenue of appraisal. Different responsibilities, tasks, and timelines. Certainly the timeline aspect of this appraisal work is different from, for example, lending purposes. There are assignments that I'm working on that are literally years in the making. There are projects that just won't go away, or assignments that I put down and several months will go by, and then the client calls and says, "Hey, Eric, where are my numbers?" And so just being able to manage different projects, the tasks that have to be done. A lot of the time I am not writing appraisal reports. It's either an appraisal review or some type of consulting work, just the different responsibilities. And if you're used to just inputting numbers into a spreadsheet, not to say that that's bad, but it's just different, right? That could be something that either could take getting used to, or again, if that's something that you're comfortable with and want to do, then that's cool. If you get to the trial stage, there may be an opportunity, I'll say an opportunity for you to testify. And there are some people that have said, "Eric, I do not want to get into your space because it scares me to death to have an attorney look at my work and point out the spelling mistake that I said. I knew it was superior. I meant to say superior for that adjustment, but I ended up writing inferior. And I'm now getting grilled for 30 minutes on that." There are opportunities where you can get into right-of-way appraising without testifying, but there may be a chance that you do. And so that may not be something you're interested in, but it's certainly a part of our business. The last part that I think is important, and especially for those that maybe have a certain level of expertise, is, we get involved in a bunch of different things, whether it's residential or commercial, and you're looking at different property rights. And, I may only be licensed for a certain level of transactions or complexities. And I want to say that there are certainly opportunities available to residential appraisers and those with, I would say, limited commercial experience to get involved in this space. I remember working on a condemnation matter where we hired a residential appraiser to assist us because it was in their backyard and they knew those sales and those agents forward and backward. We referred a job to another appraiser for a residential property, and it turns out that the highest and best use was redevelopment for a 5-unit complex. That appraiser could certainly do that kind of work, but the one advice I would give is you don't have to go get your MAI tomorrow to do this kind of work. That's not necessary. For credibility purposes, you may be interested in getting general certified. It would certainly help with, like I said, your credibility. But as I said, again, there are opportunities for involvement in this industry, and you don't have to be someone who works on commercial real estate all the time. So that's something that I wanted to stress, being a practitioner and also one of the developers of the Condemnation course for AI. Getting started in this business. kind of a segue into that from what I just talked about. But as I said, there are a lot of rules and laws and evidence code that guide this process. I think what's important for this call is just to talk about kind of the ways to get involved. And one of the things I'll say is, this kind of work is very specialized. The manner in which the property is appraised, the analysis of rights that are being acquired, considering those damages and benefits, it takes time to learn all that. And so there are organizations that teach appraisers how to do this, and I would say that's the best place to start. It's just learning about this kind of work. And the Appraisal Institute has courses that relate to this. The International Right-of-Way Association has appraisal courses. I like IRWA because it's not just real estate appraisers. There are acquisition agents and attorneys and other experts that are involved in that organization. So it's just good to meet them. Legal and appraiser events that are centered around eminent domain. There are annual conferences in various states. There's national conferences. That is not only a great way to meet those in your industry and attorneys and agency folks, but just learning about the latest trends. It takes a little while just to get the foundation in place, but part of what makes us valuable to our clients is just being aware of new case law and new events that are going on. So you get that through going to seminars and legal events and things like that. Other appraisers, it is refreshing to be able to know who to talk to and pick up the phone and call them about certain issues. I'm certainly one that tries to answer calls and emails when questions come across. Other appraisers who have been in the trenches, so to speak, and just know how to do this and have been in and out, it's just a great way to learn from those folks and be able to learn how to do this. And I would say that a lot of cases may actually have those appraisers that are involved, and so they can tell you what was done right or kind of the methodology that they used. It's not just reading things in a book that make this profession what it is talking to folks. And that kind of leads to my next point too, which is networking is crucial for getting involved and being able to do this kind of work. It's not necessarily something where I go on a website and I sign up and I tell my client my fee and timing, and then I may or may not get the job. A lot of this is relationship based, particularly at that second level, right? The trial stage, or after the acquisition appraisal. And so going to appraisal classes, whether it's continuing ed or right-of-way specific classes, going to organizational lunches like IRWA, if it's active in your area, national events, going to different seminars. And it's not strictly appraisal related. Like I said, going to legal education seminars, if there's an eminent domain spin on it, is certainly valuable because you get to learn that whole industry and what the issues are. Online can certainly be something that's important. For those who know me, I'm kind of an avid LinkedIn poster. So just connecting on LinkedIn, email, but I would say out of the two, certainly being in person is the way to get involved. Because if I know you and you have a certain expertise, then perhaps we can work together. Or if you know me from going to all the different events and you have a question, we can connect. Finding a mentor or a peer to help you do this kind of work is important. I would not read a book on condemnation appraising and then say that I'm the expert. I've had the opportunity to work for a couple of prominent eminent domain related appraisers over the years. And so I've certainly learned how to do it from them. So working for somebody, it's kind of an obvious answer, but that's one way to do it. I know other appraisers who wanted to do this side of the business did not want to go work for somebody, and so they partnered up with appraisers who were studying their business, or paid somebody to learn, or got involved in a boot camp or a mastermind. Just learning from someone who's done it before, I think, is pretty critical for doing this kind of work. And then the last part is doing the work. Like I said before, you can read and go to appraisal courses, but talking to folks and actually getting involved in doing the work and learning what the particular issues are is important. Going back to the networking and in-person events and that comment I made about signing up for a website. I say it in jest, but as I said before, there's two levels usually for this kind of work. One is appraising a property for an offer, at the acquisition stage, and then there's the trial stage. There's certainly agencies that have on-call lists for appraisers to sign up. I'm sure a question is going to be, what is that list? And the answer is going to be, it depends on where you are. But certainly if you're going to the IRWA chapter and the president of the chapter says, hey, we have an on-call list opening up in 2024, and that's the reason to get involved. And so there's RFPs that you can sign up for online. There are both local and federal websites you can sign up for. At the trial stage, attorneys and agencies are hiring you for you. And so building that reputation can come with time, but the acquisition route is certainly something you can get into. And again, I recommend getting outside of your out of your office and talking to folks, because that's the way to get involved, meet people, and start doing this kind of work. Which leads me to poll number 3, which is, how are you getting your assignments now? It doesn't have to be right of way or eminent domain related. It could be through bankruptcy. It could be estate and trust work with some attorneys that you know, through AMCs or online platforms. So, just want to get a sense for how everyone is getting their work these days. Like I said, it's certainly a very personal relationship for this side of the business, especially at the litigation stage. But yeah, it sounds like most of the folks here have the same kind of circumstance that I have. Established client relationships, a lot through AMCs, and then a lot through personal referrals and networking, which is great. So again, I would recommend just meeting people and letting them know who you are and what your experience is, because it's certainly something that's needed and going to be needed as time goes on. Technology. I didn't say this in the beginning. I wanted to give a shout out to Valkyrie and Appraisal Buzz, especially Jim, for the opportunity. Andy's going to jump on in a minute and talk about what Valkyrie does, but it's interesting about technology, because when we appraise property, it may be obvious, but at the time that you're doing this appraisal, that project is not built most of the time. And so we as appraisers use maps and plans and renderings just to get an understand of what's going on, in order to analyze those damages and benefits if they exist. And so it's really important from that aspect to be able to use mapping and technology. I don't use ChatGPT yet to write my appraisal reports. Don't know how I feel about that yet, but certainly just having those capabilities with GIS and mapping. I know on the podcast, my colleague Matt was talking about goggles and being like the wizard, that 1980s movie with Fred Savage, and talking about how one day we can look at projects as they're built, but maybe not today, but in the future. Software, before I turn it over to Annie, is something that I wanted to stress, because like I said before, you may be working on several properties at once, and you may be working with several different inputs. And one of the challenges is making sure that everything is consistent, making sure that your adjustments are going the way that you want it to. And a lot of my review work, if there's an inconsistency, that can be pretty hard on the credibility of your assignment results. And so having that consistency, I think, is important. Annie, would you like to talk about what you guys do and how it plays into eminent domain appraising?
Absolutely. Although I love hearing you speak, Eric. I mean, you have such a wealth of knowledge, and this is not my first rodeo with Eric. I always feel blessed to get to, present with him and be part of his events. So thank you for all of the really helpful knowledge.
My pleasure.
So you brought up so many great considerations. As we start delving deeper into software and looking at how technology can really empower appraisers. Okay, I'm driving the slides, aren't I? There we go. We'll get this. So we wanted to share with you, first off, some of the key ways that technology and appraisal software, and specifically our solution, Valkyrie, really empowers appraisers and specifically eminent domain appraisers. And then we wanted to just give you a quick look at our specific eminent domain features that we have. So you can learn a little more about Valkyrie, but also so it helps you guide evaluating technology, because we really do believe that choosing the right technology partner is key for folks practicing in these specialty areas like eminent domain and to building their business. So Valkyrie offers a host of benefits. Specifically for our customers, we offer specialized engagement and report templates that support right-of-way analysis, so acquisition analysis, actual eminent domain valuations, and specifically State Department of Transportation needs. We'll delve into that in a little bit, but we're giving you a framework. And this lets you more efficiently capture your data. Like Eric was saying, there's a very high demand for data in appraisals in general, but then as you know, with eminent domain, it's even bigger. And so you're having to consult more sources. You need to have that consistency. So we give you a lot of frameworks and templates to let you capture the data and move it through the process. And then we support your analysis needs, so you're not having to rebuild your tables each time, and then ultimately produce a very high quality, consistent report. So what this is about is we give you standardization, you get to leverage best practices, and it helps you scale your business. But one of the hallmarks of Valkyrie is that you're not sacrificing flexibility. I think that's so key when evaluating software in general, is you want to leverage all of these standards, but then you don't want to be handcuffed. So as you evaluate solutions, make sure that allows for you to have that flexibility on the engagement level or even on a standardized practice level. This is going to let you, by having technology and leveraging it, you can produce your analyses faster. You can turn your reports faster. We know that's more and more important in this industry. And you really can then not only produce revenue more quickly, but you can take on more engagements. So choosing the right partner is important. So we're going to look first at the Valkyrie platform, because our eminent domain solutions are built on our overall Valkyrie platform. So the first ways that our eminent domain customers benefit is with our core platform. And our core platform is separated into three components. We start with our online database, and that's so important because, as you all know, the key to a solid valuation and appraisal is good data. So we have a very robust database that helps you capture and structure your data. And what that means is it's fast for you to enter it. We actually help you auto-populate a lot of data from different sources. And then we send it to where you need downstream in the process. So we populate the data that you entered into the database into the analysis tables, and then ultimately we push your conclusions into the report. So you are saving significant time. And really what our customers have found after they've used Valkyrie for a while is that not only is this helping them grow their business, but it really helps them differentiate. And so our platform and their unique use of our platform really becomes a competitive advantage for their business. Okay, So now I love this. So what do we do specifically for eminent domain? So within eminent domain, this is obviously more complex. The analyses are more extensive. You have more data aspects to consider. So we start with the Valkyrie platform. You enter all your data in. We have some unique fields for eminent domain engagements that capture some of that additional data. And then we have your unique analysis tables. So when you get our eminent domain solution, you have additional analyses available in our workbook. But we don't stop there. So not only do you have these initial additional analysis functions, but if you do state DOT work, we are building out our library of state DOT support. So right now we support 5 key states. We support actually 6. So California is partially supported. We have Texas support, Colorado, Indiana, North Carolina, and Georgia. And this is important because when you're doing eminent domain appraisals on behalf of the Departments of Transportation, they have very specific analysis and reporting requirements that are different from many mainstream appraisals. They also will have specialized forms that have to be filled out. In the case of Texas, I think there's 17 or more specific forms and tables that have to be populated. So if you're doing this sort of work, you want to have a repeatable process. And the support that we've built into Valkyrie gives you that structure and support. So you can automatically enter the data and then you populate the forms with literally the click of a button. I call it the easy button. So we all remember the Staples commercial, give me the easy button. This is our solution for that. And then the other thing that we've learned in supporting eminent domain practitioners, and I'm sure Eric can attest to this, is that every engagement is unique. Yes, I'm getting thumbs up. I love it. So every engagement really is unique, and your need to go what we call off-roading is very high. And so while we give you all of these standard templates and this automation, we let you basically build the analyses that you need job by job. Or you can even build in standard customized analyses for your practice or region into our workbook, and then those persist throughout the process. So again, that flexibility, having standardization, yet with flexibility is really key to a good appraisal software solution. So as we look forward, there's a lot more that we'd love to share with you on our specific solution, and I think with appraisal software in general, but we only have a little bit of time today. So we definitely encourage you to explore appraisal-specific technology as you build your practice. It really is an empowering element to help you grow and produce high-quality appraisals. And then for anyone who's interested, we would love to share more about Valkyrie on an individualized demo. Also, to support your exploration of technology in the eminent domain space, we are offering everyone on the webinar today our special companion guide. And so the companion guide is going to give you some tips on how to consider technology for your eminent domain practice. And then you can see here also for everyone attending, we have a special discount offer. So we would love to show you more about Valkyrie. We are thrilled to be able to co-sponsor this webinar today and help you all learn more about eminent domain. So thank you.
Thanks, Annie. Yeah, super cool stuff. All right. Now that you've heard a little bit about what I do and maybe some of the opportunities that are available, I'd like to hear how likely you are to pursue opportunities like this. Like I said, there is demand for this kind of work. I see it going into certainly the near future, but would just like to hear about that. And then I know a lot of questions were submitted, so we can talk about that as we wrap up. But again, want to thank Appraisal Buzz and Valkyrie for the chance to talk about what I do. It's certainly a fascinating aspect of it. And let's see what we got here as far as answers.
So Eric, as far as the Q&As, I've bumped up the ones that I think would be interesting to the top of your list.
Yeah.
So you can take those or choose which ones you want to take from there.
No, certainly. Yeah, I think there's one question about, does there always need to be a taking of real property? And there's an example that's given here, but it's really interesting. And that it has to do with the laws that are relevant to the jurisdiction that you're in. If you have a left turning lane and that gets removed, is that a compensable damage, or is that just police power and the agency or the city can do what they want with respect to circulation of roads? It depends. I know that's everyone's favorite real estate answer, but a lot of the time it could be a property has to be physically or actually impacted for an eminent domain action to happen. There are times when agencies acquire rights that they did not plan to acquire, and so that may require appraisal services. There could be instances where a project occurs and it's far away and not impacting the property, but somehow it impacts the property, whether it's traffic issues or the like. And so it depends, and that's what's really interesting about the work that I do, is that the case specific facts are different almost every time. To Annie's point about how no two projects are alike.
They're unicorns.
They're unicorns, yes, all special. There's a question about whether clients hire mostly certified general appraisers or certified residential appraisers. And I go back to my earlier comment about how, depending on your expertise, certainly someone with residential expertise can be the one that is the better person to use over a certified commercial appraiser. It just depends on what the project is and what property is being impacted. That's why it's important to learn this side of the business and also connect with appraisers that do this kind of work. Like I said, in several instances, we've referred residential assignments to folks that we thought could do a better job, or timing or expertise or what have you for the reason. Other times we've worked with residential appraisers to gain insight. And so that's a two-way street. We get to learn a little bit about the residential side of a case, and that appraiser gets to learn more about the litigation side. So I would say, in general, it's property specific, but there's certainly opportunities for both certified residential and certified commercial appraisers to do that work. And the other comment, like I mentioned earlier, is even if you primarily are a residential specialist, having that general certification adds to the credibility of being a practitioner. There was a question about fees and how fees are considered when you're testifying. And again, I hate saying it depends. I really do. But it can be hourly. It could be a flat fee. It could be a combination of both, where it's a flat fee for the appraisal work and then post-appraisal services, it's hourly. There are times where we don't know the complexity of the assignment. And so it could be hourly just to explore what the heck's going on. And so that's what makes it fun, is having that opportunity to work with clients about what they need and what the scope of work is. The scope of work may not be an appraisal report. It could be all the valuation work leading up to it, and then just telling the client what the issue is. But in answer to that question specifically, it can be flat or hourly, depending on the context of the case. Question about getting started to find an appraiser to work with. Meeting folks at Appraisal Institute and IRWA events, certainly a way to do that. I don't know if there's other local appraiser meetups in town where you can talk to folks. Just going out there and going to those types of events, legal events, is what I would recommend. It's easy. Otherwise, you'd be emailing or calling everyone in town, which is certainly a way to do it. But there's usually a couple of places where these kind of right-of-way specialists show up. There was a question about getting involved with a certain state's Department of Transportation. Department of Transportation for a particular state certainly has a lot of opportunities available. And I would piggyback on my earlier answer, which is getting involved with folks that do that kind of work already. And there may be a state website or a contact that you can meet or reach out to try and get involved in that kind of work. Specific seminars or conferences where potential clients can be in attendance. I was at the IRWA national event in Denver. Certainly a lot of different clients or potential clients there. CLE International puts on a great annual seminar in Southern California, sometimes in Northern California. I'm not sure if they put on stuff in other states, but that's certainly something to check out. ALI CLE is another organization that puts on an annual Eminent Domain conference. That is primarily legal focused, attorney focused, but there's certainly valuation issues, and getting in a room with a bunch of attorneys is never a bad thing. I think those were kind of the main questions that I wanted to touch on. But again, my email's there. LinkedIn, you can look for me. But again, the main thing is just to get involved, get learning. There's certainly demand for this kind of work, and appreciate the opportunity to jump on and talk about this.
Well, thank you so much, Eric and Annie. This was a great presentation. It was really interesting. I know that our listeners learned a lot, and I really appreciate Valkyrie by sponsoring this and putting this on for everyone as well.
Cool.
We were honored.
Well, we are recording this. A recording link will be sent out to everybody once it's done processing. Double check, make sure you get the handout in the handout tab. That's from Valkyrie. And then I will pop up the offer for you as well for anyone that missed it, so that you can take advantage of that software. But we really appreciate everyone joining us, and have a great day.